everyone. Welcome back to Practice English TV. I'm Mark, and I'm really glad you're here with us today.
And I'm Emma. Thanks for joining us. Maybe you're listening while relaxing, or maybe you're practicing your English. Either way, we're happy you're here.
So today's topic is a little different, but I think it's something everyone can relate to.
Yeah, it's simple, but also really powerful.
We're talking about one small habit, something you can do every day that can actually change your life over time.
And the interesting part is, it's not something big or difficult. It's actually very simple.
But simple doesn't always mean easy, right?
Exactly. Sometimes the smallest habits are the hardest to keep.
So today we're going to talk about what this habit is, why it matters, and how you can start using it in your daily life.
Just listen, relax, and enjoy the conversation. You don't have to understand every word.
Yeah, take it step by step, and let's get into it together. Most people try to change their life and then stop after a few days.
Yeah, that happens more often than we like to admit.
It usually starts with a lot of motivation. You feel excited, you make a plan, and you tell yourself, this time I'm really going to do it.
And the plan is always big. Wake up early, exercise, study, eat healthy, everything at once.
Exactly. It feels powerful in the moment.
But then, a few days later, things start to feel different.
Yeah, you wake up tired, your day gets busy, and suddenly that big plan feels a little too heavy.
And that's usually when people start to stop.
I've done this so many times. I tell myself, okay, starting tomorrow, I'm going to change everything.
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, and then 2 or 3 days later, I'm back to my old routine.
It's like we expect too much from ourselves too quickly.
So here's the question. What if the problem is not your motivation?
That's interesting. Then what is the problem?
Maybe the problem is that we're trying to do too much at once.
Yeah, that makes sense. Big changes feel exciting, but they're hard to maintain.
So instead of asking, how can I change my whole life? What if you ask, what is one small thing I can do today?
That already feels lighter.
Let's imagine a simple situation. You want to improve your English, but you feel overwhelmed.
So instead of studying for 1 hour, you study for just 5 or 10 minutes.
And because it's small, you actually do it.
Here's another situation. You want to become healthier, but you don't feel like going to the gym.
So you go for a short walk instead. Nothing intense, just something simple.
And the key is you repeat it every day.
I remember a short story from someone I know. He wanted to start reading, but he always said he didn't have time.
That's a very common excuse.
So he made a rule for himself, just 1 page a day.
Only 1 page?
Yeah, just one. It felt so easy that he couldn't really say no to it.
That's actually kind of smart.
And the funny thing is, once he started reading, he often continued for longer.
So the habit helped him start, and then everything else followed.
Exactly. He didn't wait to feel motivated, he just made it easy to begin.
And I think that's the idea we're exploring today.
Yeah, this one habit is not about doing something big or impressive.
It's about doing something small, but doing it every single day.
Something so simple that even on your worst day, you can still do it.
And over time, that small action starts to change how you live.
Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady way.
And those quiet changes are often the ones that last the longest.
Let's keep going because the real-life stories behind this idea are actually really relatable. You know what's interesting? When people talk about habits, they often think it has to feel difficult or uncomfortable to be effective.
Yeah, like if it's not hard, then it doesn't really count.
Exactly. But I've seen the opposite happen in real life, and it actually surprised me.
What do you mean?
So I had a friend who wanted to start exercising, but he really didn't like the gym. He tried going a few times, but every time he went, he felt tired and unmotivated.
That already sounds like a bad start.
Yeah, and after a week, he just stopped going completely.
That happens so often.
But then he tried something different. Instead of going to the gym, he told himself, I'm just going to put on my running shoes every morning.
Wait, just put on the shoes?
Yeah, that's it. No pressure to run, no pressure to exercise, just wear the shoes.
That sounds almost too simple.
It really does, but here's the funny part. Once he had his shoes on, he often thought, well, I'm already dressed, maybe I can walk a little.
And then the walk turns into something more.
Exactly. Sometimes it was just 5 minutes, sometimes 10, but he kept doing it every day.
So the habit wasn't exercise every day, it was just put on your shoes.
Right. And over time, that tiny habit led to a bigger change.
That's a really good example.
Here's another situation. I used to have trouble staying focused when working. I would sit down, open my laptop, and then somehow end up watching random videos.
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, I would tell myself just one video, and then suddenly 30 minutes were gone.
Time disappears so fast like that.
So I tried a small habit. I told myself, just work for 5 minutes.
Only 5 minutes?
Yeah, because 5 minutes feels easy. You don't resist it.
And what happened?
Most of the time, once I started, I continued working for much longer.
So again, the habit is just about starting.
Exactly. Starting is usually the hardest part.
Here's a small situation I've experienced. I wanted to drink more water during the day, but I kept forgetting.
That's actually very common.
So I made a simple rule. Every time I sit down at my desk, I take a sip of water.
That's a nice natural trigger.
Yeah, I didn't need to think too much about it. It just became part of my routine.
And over time, you probably drank more water without even trying.
Exactly. It didn't feel like effort anymore.
There's also a short story I remember from someone learning English.
Oh, that's perfect for our listeners.
He wanted to improve his speaking, but he felt shy and didn't know where to start.
That's a very real problem.
So instead of trying to speak perfectly, he made a small habit. Every day, he would speak one sentence out loud.
Just one sentence?
Yeah, just one. It could be anything, something simple, like, today is a busy day, or I feel tired.
That feels very manageable.
And after a few weeks, he started speaking more naturally and with more confidence.
So the habit helped him build comfort, not just skill.
Exactly. And that's the key idea. Small habits reduce pressure, and that makes it easier to keep going.
And when you keep going, that's when real change happens.
Yeah, not in one big moment, but in many small, quiet moments over time.
And those small moments are something anyone can start today.
Let's talk about some simple words and ideas behind this, because that will make everything even clearer. Before we go further, I think it helps to slow down for a moment and look at a few simple words people often use when talking about habits.
Yeah, because you'll hear these words a lot in real conversations, not just in learning situations.
Let's start with a very common one, habit.
A habit is something you do regularly, often without thinking too much about it.
Like brushing your teeth. You don't stop and ask yourself, should I do this today? You just do it.
Yeah, it feels automatic after a while.
And habits can be good or bad, depending on what you do.
For example, reading every day can be a good habit, but checking your phone all the time might not be.
Yeah, I've definitely had that phone habit before.
I think most of us have.
Another word you'll hear a lot is routine.
Routine is a group of habits that you do regularly, usually at a certain time.
For example, your morning routine might include waking up, drinking coffee, and maybe checking your messages.
Here's a small situation. You wake up, and before you even get out of bed, you reach for your phone.
Yeah, that becomes part of your routine without you even noticing.
And once something is part of your routine, it can be hard to change.
Now here's an important word, consistent.
If you are consistent, it means you do something regularly, not just once in a while.
So if you practice English every day, even for a short time, you are being consistent.
And honestly, consistency is more important than doing something big once.
Yeah, doing something small every day is often more powerful than doing something big one time.
Another word people talk about a lot is motivation.
Motivation is that feeling that makes you want to do something.
Like when you feel excited and ready to start something new.
But the problem is, motivation doesn't stay the same.
Yeah, some days you feel great, and other days, not so much.
Here's a situation. One day you feel inspired, so you study for an hour.
But the next day you feel tired and you don't study at all.
That's why depending only on motivation can be difficult.
Yeah, because motivation comes and goes.
So instead of relying on motivation, people often talk about discipline.
Discipline means you do something even when you don't feel like doing it.
It sounds a bit serious, but it doesn't have to be extreme.
With small habits, discipline actually feels easier because the action is not too hard.
There's one more idea that connects everything: starting small.
Yeah, this one is really important.
Starting small means you begin with something so easy that you almost can't say no.
For example, instead of reading 10 pages, you read just 1 page.
Here's a short story. I once tried to build a habit of writing every day.
But you kept putting it off?
Yeah, I told myself I had to write a lot, and that made me avoid it.
That happens more than people think.
So I changed the rule, just one sentence.
That feels much easier to start.
And once I wrote one sentence, I usually kept going.
So again, the small start made the action easier.
Exactly. It removed the pressure.
So when you hear these words, habit, routine, consistent, motivation, discipline, they're all connected.
And they all point to the same idea. Small actions done regularly can create real change.
And once you understand that, everything starts to feel a lot more possible.
Let's take that idea and see how it plays out in a real, everyday situation. Let's picture a real moment. It's the end of the day, you're at home, and you're thinking about starting a new habit.
Yeah, maybe you're sitting on your bed or at your desk, and you're just a little tired.
You look at your phone, you look around, and then you remember, oh right, I said I would start today.
And right away, there's this small voice in your head that says, maybe I can start tomorrow.
That voice shows up very quickly.
Yeah, it doesn't wait at all.
So now you're sitting there and you're thinking, do I really want to do this right now?
And if the habit feels big, the answer is usually no.
Exactly. But now imagine your habit is very small.
Like reading just 1 page.
So instead of thinking, I need to read a lot, you think, it's just 1 page.
That feels much easier to accept.
So you pick up the book, open it, and start reading.
And once you begin, something changes.
Yeah, the hardest part was actually starting.
Here's the first mini situation. You read that 1 page and then you pause.
You think, okay, I already did what I planned.
And now you have a choice.
You can stop, or you can continue.
And sometimes you just keep going without thinking too much about it.
Because now it feels easier.
Exactly. The pressure is gone.
Now let's look at another moment. A few days later, you've been consistent. You start to feel a little proud of yourself.
Yeah, like, hey, I've actually been doing this.
But then comes a difficult day.
You're busy, you're tired, and your mind says, it's okay to skip today.
And that's a very real moment.
So now you pause and think, do I skip or do I keep going?
But then you remember, it's just 1 page.
So even on a hard day, you can still do it.
And that's what keeps the habit alive.
Let's imagine another example. You want to practice speaking English.
Okay, but instead of having a full conversation, you decide to say 1 sentence a day.
Here's a small situation. You're alone in your room and you're about to speak.
And you suddenly feel a little awkward.
You look around, like, is anyone listening?
Even when no one is there, it still feels a bit strange.
Yeah, it's such a funny feeling at first.
But you still say your sentence, something simple like, "Today was a long day."
And once you say it, you realize it wasn't that bad.
Exactly. And the next day, it feels a little easier.
Here's a short story. I once tried to build a habit of writing down one thought every night.
Was it difficult at first?
A little. Some nights I just stared at the page and thought, I have nothing to write.
Yeah, that happens.
But then I told myself, just write one simple sentence.
That removes the pressure.
Exactly. And some nights that one sentence turned into more.
So the habit wasn't about writing a lot.
It was about showing up every day.
And that's really the heart of this idea.
Small habits are not about big effort.
They're about small actions that you repeat even when you don't feel like it.
And over time, those small actions start to feel natural.
Yeah, they become part of your identity.
You're no longer someone who tries sometimes.
You become someone who shows up every day, even in small ways.
And that shift is actually very powerful.
Let's keep going because there are some simple phrases that can help you talk about this in your daily life. Let's go through some useful phrases you can use when talking about habits and daily routines. These are very common in everyday conversations.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, once you learn these, you can use them in many different situations.
Let's start with a simple one. You can say, "I'm trying to build a habit."
For example, I'm trying to build a habit of reading every day.
Another useful phrase is, "I want to be more consistent."
You might say, I want to be more consistent with my English practice.
Here's a small situation. Someone asks you, "Why are you doing this every day?"
You can answer, I'm trying to improve little by little.
That sounds natural and clear.
Another helpful phrase is, I'm starting small.
For example, "I'm starting small, just 10 minutes a day."
This shows that you're not putting too much pressure on yourself.
Now let's look at a slightly different idea. Sometimes you want to explain a difficulty.
You can say, it's hard to stay consistent.
Or, "I lose motivation sometimes."
Those are very honest and natural sentences.
Here's another situation. You started a habit, but you stopped for a few days.
You can say, I'm trying to get back on track.
That's a very common phrase.
It means you want to return to your routine.
Another useful phrase is, "I just need to start."
Because starting is often the hardest part.
Here's a small example. You're sitting at your desk and you don't feel like studying.
You can tell yourself, I'll just do 5 minutes.
That's a very powerful sentence.
And once you start, it usually becomes easier to continue.
Let's look at another phrase. You can say, "It's becoming a habit."
For example, studying every day is becoming a habit for me.
That shows progress over time.
Here's one more situation. Someone asks you, how do you stay consistent?
You can answer, "I keep it simple."
Or, I don't try to do too much at once.
Those answers are very natural and easy to understand.
Sometimes people also say, I'm taking it one step at a time.
That's a great phrase. It shows patience and a calm approach.
There's also a phrase I really like, I'm just getting started.
Yeah, it sounds simple, but it feels very positive.
And it also removes a lot of pressure because you're not trying to be perfect.
Exactly. You're just beginning, and that's enough.
Let's look at one last short situation.
You're talking to a friend about your new habit.
They ask, is it difficult?
You can say, "Not really. It's small, but I do it every day."
That sentence shows both simplicity and consistency.
And that's really the main idea behind everything we've talked about.
You don't need big, complicated sentences to explain your habits.
Simple, clear phrases are more than enough.
And the more you use them, the more natural they will feel.
Let's finish with a few simple tips and a question for you to think about. Before we finish, let's go over a few simple tips to help you build a small habit and actually keep it in your daily life.
Yeah, these are very practical ideas, and you can start using them right away without changing too much.
First, keep your habit very small and very clear.
You don't need something big or impressive to get started.
Even something like, I'll read one page or I'll practice for 5 minutes is already enough.
And that's already a really strong beginning.
Another tip is to focus on showing up, not doing a lot.
Yeah, the goal is not to do something perfectly, but to do it regularly.
For example, even on a busy day, you can still do a very small version of your habit.
And that's what helps you stay consistent over time.
One more tip is don't rely too much on motivation.
That's a big one.
Some days you will feel motivated, but many days you won't.
And that's completely normal.
So instead of asking, do I feel like doing this? You just do your small habit anyway.
Because it's simple, it feels possible even on low energy days.
Let's add one more helpful idea.
Yes.
Try to connect your habit to something you already do every day.
That makes it much easier to remember.
For example, after you wake up, you practice one sentence in English.
Or after dinner, you read one page.
That small connection can make your habit feel more natural.
And over time, it becomes part of your routine without too much effort.
Now, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, here's a simple question for you.
What is one small habit you want to start this week?
You can write a short answer in English.
For example, I want to practice English for 5 minutes every day.
Or, I want to read one page before I go to sleep.
You can also share your experience.
Maybe you tried building a habit before and it felt a little difficult.
Or maybe you found something that worked well for you.
Those small experiences are very real and very helpful.
And we read all your comments, so we'd really love to hear your story.
And if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe and share it with someone who is also trying to improve their English.
Keep it simple, stay consistent, and take it one step at a time.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening, and keep showing up.
Bye for now and happy learning.